Okay, what I want to do today is I want to make sure that we spend some time with my giving you what I have to, what I brought, and then we can break and take on some personal things like we did last week. But this week I want to get into the material that we have. I'm going to begin by putting on the board here what would be the purpose of Yahweh, Yahweh creating. What might be the reasons why divinity chose to create? And so we're going to get through this quickly. So if you got a thought, tell me, and we'll put it on the board.
Is it something or someone to love?
Oh, someone to love. Okay. Anything else?
Things get pretty boring.
Huh?
Things will get pretty boring.
Oh, so we'll put up your board with a question mark. Any other thoughts?
Why did God create?
Yeah, why? And I ask the question because it will determine the mechanisms of evolution. The answer to that question will highly affect what mechanisms would be necessary or would be involved.
Well, obviously, for the same reason we created the Constitution, form a more perfect union.
Form a more perfect union. Now, you're getting really radical when you say that. And I think very accurate. A more perfect union. Oh, I got it right or it right. Yeah. Very good.
Now you're talking about the totality of creation, not just the planet.
Yeah, the totality, the very decision to create it all. What would be motivating, or what would be the thought behind, or why?
Like her first answer would be very relevant for planet Earth and humanity, as far as the totality of all of the solar systems.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is, and I have to give you credit, you hit the nail on the head. That has got to be the prime reason. Now, and that involves the formation of greater union, and it also involves also the concept that the greater union has an implication of something that's really pretty strong, really, and that is the evolution of divinity.
Of divinity?
Yep.
Yeah.
That implies that. Because if you stop and think about quantum mechanics, it says when the observer observes something, it changes the observed, but it also changes the observer. Now, they're not quite ready to talk about that. Nobody's quite ready there's not very many people there are people who are talking about looking at the fulfilling of a depth in divinity, which is to say, that's an interesting question. In the eons of eternity was divinity and evolution. That's just a hairy question I don't want to get into, but at least you begin to see the tie, and you kind of imply it when you talk about a greater union. That's going to be a greater union for divinity as well as us.
I don't know what that means.
What? The evolution of divinity?
Does that mean the divination of all creation?
Is
that what you're saying or not?
Let's take it this way. Let's start this way first of all. If we're going to say, I think we can say very safely that love is the key center point. This is key. The love is key. And it's a very selfless love that wanted to have an object of love that could return and love on the basis of equality. Now it's equality in quotes a little bit, but equality with divinity. And that's a very, very strong statement, to think that divinity wanted to share. See, part of this, if you take a look at love and you start breaking love down, you look at sharing, you look at communication, you look at union, or you look at friendship. I mean, you've got all kinds of things that are involved in the concept of love. And certainly divinity wanted to share the joy, share the meaning, share the beauty. But there's a couple catches that begin to happen when divinity makes that decision. When that decision of sharing comes into place, then that means that creation is going to have to achieve self-reflection. Because up to self-reflection, there is not the give and take that divinity wanted. You gotta have, and to be now. So then when you start saying, okay, now that makes a lot of sense, but when you start agreeing to that, now you're agreeing to the dynamic nature of man, of humankind. I mean, that'll change your thinking about what we are when you realize that this self-reflection was for a purpose of eventually all to be done sharing community, union, love in its fullest entirety. See, this is getting divinity right in front of us. Instead of the old style is that here we were, here's humanity, and divinity's out here above and beyond everything about human, and there's a dualism and a separation there. And so it's if that were the truth, it would really be awesome and almost impenetrably scary and overcoming to think of a divinity who wanted to get in deep unity with humanity. But evolution shifts that emphasis.
That's the purpose of the incarnation, is it not?
Well, I would say I probably agree, but I'm going to change the focus of the incarnation in doing it, and putting it in the evolutionary mode. I just wanted to bring this up, that this intention that divinity had makes a difference in terms of what the actual purpose of creation makes a difference in terms of the mechanisms that will bring it about. So if you start with the fact of a profound choice of love, and you make that the initial direction or principle that to be worked on is that love, and then you see that the only way you can have it is you've got self-reflection. Now you got to get to it. So one of the problems in divinity had in saying, okay, let's create the universe. And I do want to talk about this not just as for this world, but very much for the whole universe. The creation creates a situation where we just don't have a good
Windows are not working, are they?
No, they aren't very good. Okay,
Mine is better one.
no, I don't think it can. I really,
Did you try that one?
yeah, we're
Or
both
either.
doing the same thing to me. So creation immediately involved the fact that there is going to be suffering, because suffering, the very notion of creation is going to result in suffering in the sense of things that don't work. Which means there's a lot of trial and error in the process. It isn't an automatic thing. I mean, if divinity said, I'm just going to create, just take the earth here, but I'm just going to create it in one fell swoop, and it will include humankind in it. Or whenever I need to change it a little bit, I'll just step in and add a point of creation all the time. And outside, looking into and creating. The problem that puts in place is that dualism puts in place God over there and man over here. And what you really get at that point is something a lot closer to artificial intelligence than you do free will and the humanity we know we experience. Now that may be a little bit crazy to think like this for a minute, but if you just keep trying to sort out the implications of this, then we're going to understand the mechanisms of creation a whole lot more plainly, because it turns out that the only way that divinity could create a finite, not infinite thing, and then have it reach a point of co-reflection and be unity in process, is going to take a process. It's going to take a process. It can't be done in spurts of creation, just dropping it in. Because it's like, for instance, and I think the really good example of it is for humankind to create a robot that can do all these things, and you give it intelligence, but you're never going to get into friendship, unity, and communion with that thing. It's on two different levels of existence. And that would have been divinity's problem in the kind of way that creation was seen from the beginning of the era of the manifestation of divinity that stepped into humanity's history to explain things. Intervention. And that divine intervention doesn't come to do it, it comes to explain it. And there's a lot of difference between that.
What would you say that Chardin's, how would he answer your initial question as to God's purpose of creation?
It's a real simple one. Oh, we got all kinds of possibilities here. It's a real simple one, because in Chardin,
That's not much better.
just play around on a piece of paper and give me a good one. That's
I
all.
can't, hand me a piece of paper, I can't find any paper.
I got paper. I think that's me. I'll try to get it colored again. So now, so Chardin is very clear about the centrality of love. Absolutely clear about that. Now, see, and here again,
Which book would he address that specifically?
it's one of those things. It's going to be.
Thin, but it looks like it's got ink in it.
It's going to be one of those things that's much like spirit. It's so much in everything and about everything. He doesn't get into giving us some indications that we would do it in an organized, spelled out manner. He's going to be always a poet and do it in a poetic and prose kind of way. But when you read him, you begin to realize that he's very aware of the awesomeness of love of divinity toward us. And that begins to come through in little bits of osmosis. And if you don't get it in direct words, it's like it runs through the whole thing. And so without a doubt, if you asked him, I'm sure that love would be at the top of the pile of trying to answer that thing. Okay. So, thank you. So now, as we try to get this thought in our head that creation by its very nature in finiteness, in order to get over to where you have a a completely free will in the image and likeness of divinity, which Genesis tells we are. You've got to get that to a point where it reaches the beginnings of consciousness that allows for decision and free will and knowledge to make those free will things. But even that, and I caution you just a little bit, if you think in terms of life working through up and out, so that there's the past in flow and the ahead to go. If you think in terms like that, then we're going to come to a point where we're going to view humanity a little differently, and we're going to view our intelligence and our self-reflection as still under development in evolution. We are not the finished product as we stand here today. There's more of the human self-reflection to grow into place. And we're not ready as a people yet, and likely as creation as a whole yet, we're not ready for the step of evolution that will take us to Omega point. Which is to say, we haven't got fully developed yet.
That's because we don't love each other.
Yeah, which manifested all over the place, and we haven't learned to love each other. You know what?
That's why I said, early on, before folks come, that there are forces or powers, whatever, that are negative, evil, destructive.
But let's
that will
start
fight against love.
But let's start first of all and take that judgment off of forces and just say that's a fact of creation. Creation, by its very nature, involves diminishment.
Right.
That's a force against love.
Right.
Okay, you don't have to think of a spirit kind of thing. Now we'll come to that, and we'll have to handle that for a number of reasons. But when we start looking at suffering and diminishment, it's in the very nature of creation. Now, for me, when I get a hold of that, and I hear Paul saying, all creation groans for redemption, okay, then I simply say, oh, that's right. Not only is this human reflective part here need redemption, matter needs redemption.
Mm-hmm.
And it can go awry. Either made by man, but just on its own is able to do that. And so a lot of suffering and terror comes into the situation through massive earthquakes and hurricanes and things that happen within the flow of things. An asteroid whopping us, coming out of space and whopping us. There's so many ways that the very nature of creation needs redemption. See, in the old days, when we had this idea that we blocked it out so that you have God over here and you have man over here in these blocks, and when you blocked it out, then we were able to say two humans are the source of all mankind, and their sin goes and infects all of mankind. Well, that doesn't work. And Chardin was a good enough anthropologist, and he says it very simply. He says this kind of notion of humankind, two a male and a female, don't work. It won't work. Because all of the evolutionary process demands a crowd, not a single person. And when we get done to seeing this, and we finally begin to really look at this, we're going to find out that there are some DNA aspects of the human family and the earth that is not shared off of one branch, but there's several branches. But see, the one branch here was the definition of humanity. In this kind of thinking, that was the definition of humanity. But in evolutionary thinking, that's not the definition of humanity. It's not the definition of divine working with humanity. And so that's why these things I'm talking about right now, it scared the diddlywad, whatever diddlywad is, out of those people that were his authorities. Because they saw that indeed they were going to have to do, they were afraid they were going to lose their entire scholarship and their entire theology and their entire...
What's the alternative to this?
What's the alternative to this?
Yes.
Evolution.
No, no. If you don't want to have two humans, what's the alternative?
Oh, the alternative is humans spring up in several branches.
What is that?
It means that the branch from which the Asian human came, we might very soon discover is not the branch that the African humans came from. But they're both human. See, when you define this human this way, then we get really tight and say, okay, human is obviously our DNA and our things. We can look at our hands and our face and our feet and then we look at our DNA and we can say, oh, that's human. But that's really not good thinking, because the chimpanzee, and somebody needs to look it up and I don't know what it is, it's in the high 90s, carries the same DNA as we have.
It's about very close to 94-95% of chimpanzee DNA matches what we consider Homo sapiens.
Right.
But you're not, I don't hear you saying what the alternative is.
The alternative, as I understand it, shall I
Go
finish
ahead.
up, is that you evolve a variety of living things, and they start changing. And some of those things change to become
But
more...
there has to be a beginning of these multiple things.
Sure, and they go back to bacteria, and the bacteria go back to viruses, and the viruses go back to a primordial soup of chemicals that contain the spirit.
But now I'm going to caution you.
All right.
And when you come up and you say, okay, then you got these different soups producing, they don't produce different kinds of humans, because it turns out that in the process of evolution, you have design, and that's really important to remember. But that design lies in the spirit, and the spirit then has a built-in kind of process that it's not going to change. So you don't have bunches of soup that produce. Now, at least I'll take that back. There's just some things going through my head where that may not be true. I might have to eat those words one day.
Would all evolutionists say that there's a design?
No, because Darwin would never say that. And so the evolutionists that have stayed with Darwin have always stayed with chance and natural selection and just things happen to work out kind of thing. The design that the evolutionists who are fighting the creationists, their thing is they get mad at the creationists who talk about intelligent design, and they're pointing back to the spirit design. I wish they would use the word spirit design instead of intelligent design, but because I think it makes a more simpler, better picture. But they're very much not allowing for the design to be in the picture. Not in the way that, not in anything near the way in which it is by spirit. See, again, when we come back to what divinity wanted to do is enter into a love relationship, and that needs to be in a self-reflective process, but that's going to take a process to get it there. You can't just snap it into creation and have it work. It won't work that way. So the only process left is evolution. And in my mind, the very decision to create in space and time demanded evolution, just because of the nature of space and time. So that we should have seen this a long time ago. Why didn't we? Why didn't Abraham get this? God intervenes into human family to give revelation of things, and a tremendous important revelation has come from within the interventions of divinity with Abraham. We start really big with Abraham, to a degree with Moses, and to some degree with Enoch. But we really see it in Noah, I mean not Moses, but Noah, and then we really see intervention in the life of Moses and the prophets down the line. Okay, what the intervention isn't trying to create the situation, it's trying to explain the situation. And what we have done, we saw that intervention as creatively setting it in motion. And that's not correct. It's intervention that explains, that unfolds. See, and again, back to this thing. If you stop and think about this, those people in Moses' day weren't unhappy people. And they didn't have what we have. They didn't have the knowledge we have. And they didn't have all the things we've made with that knowledge. And they weren't unhappy people. Their level of consciousness wasn't as great as ours. Our level of consciousness is far more developed.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Level of consciousness?
You cannot take Abraham and expect him to make a computer or understand what it was, to even understand it, or to certainly figure out how to use it.
Well, that's not a matter of consciousness.
Oh yes, it's conscious rising that causes us to come to computation. It takes conscious rising to come to know metallurgy. In history, it takes conscious rising in terms of social structures for the Magna Carta to come about. Those are huge conscious rising steps. And so when you come to the industrial age, have we in our lifetime experienced one of the most fast, productive results of conscious rising? Absolutely.
And destruction.
Huh?
And destruction.
Well, the problem with us left apart without divinity holding the center of us, we'll take any of that conscious rising to as much good or evil as we want to. And so you have tremendous evil that comes out of that conscious rising. But that doesn't change the concept. That doesn't mean the conscious rising isn't a good thing and shouldn't happen. We got to get more than that. Now I want to tell you, the ultimate battle of conscious rising comes at the omega point when it is so clear that there is a clear difference between light and darkness. We use those words for lack of a better one, for truth and non-truth. It'll be so clearly in place that it'll be eternally set. Look, if I choose to turn my back on you, you can't do a thing about it. You can turn me around, but you have to turn me around inside. See? Because I can just keep my back turned to you in the inside of me. And total darkness evil is going to be turned back to divinity. And it'll be so complete, it won't have any...
Well, why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because it's the nature of where we're going. We're going to that point. That point is our future. Now, again, all the questions you give me are taking us off a little bit what I'm trying to get into.
Say something.
Yeah.
Well, we need to put Satan into the equation. Is impeding our progress in this.
I don't want to toss it in there just yet. Because I have a reason for that. First of all, before you toss him in there, you just got to see how capacity we have for evil. Period. And you got to understand something. Evil, in the sense of the failure of things not working, in the sense of death that comes, in the sense of diminishment, is very pervasive through creation. Now, and again, if you want to try to get wrapped around this a little bit so you feel a little more comfortable, remember, divinity knew that. Divinity understood that creation would be painful, would be achieved with hard work, would have failure and fall off. And divinity knew that when it reached the level of humankind, it would get into free choice evil. But all of that, the incompleteness in matter, the incompleteness in the forms of life that come up the line of evolution. The incompletion in humankind. Divinity placed redemption over all that from the very moment of the first bit of creation. And that's why this spirit part, as being in all of creation, that spirit part, when Chardin saw that and began to talk to that, there were some thoughts and there were some religions and some philosophers that were thinking in those directions. But when he got there and spilled it out into the world in such clear words, then what he really is saying that all of creation has two aspects as creation happens. And one aspect is the outside of things, and the other aspect is the inside of things. That inside being spirit, primarily. But when you see that, that means divinity directly involved in creation, immediately in present to it. And when you say divinity is present in creation, as I taught last week, or 2 weeks ago actually, as I taught 2 weeks ago, that you have to look at speaker spoken speaking as three aspects of divinity. And when you begin to look at those three aspects of divinity, all three of those aspects are in creation in the beginning. That means incarnation began in creation. And incarnation is the promise, is the absolute certitude that we have that it's going to be redeemed. Because incarnation is set into place as the healing process of what creation causes, which is a lot of trouble and a lot of ravaging and a lot of evil that has to be balanced out. That doesn't take away in any way whatsoever from the incarnate whole presence in the sense of Jesus into the earth. Don't think that I'm saying that's the same incarnation. That's just a different manifestation, a fullness of manifestation. There's the incarnation in the beginning of creation. There's the incarnation of Jesus walking the earth 2,000 years ago. Then there's the incarnation and final.
Where's the incarnation? The first one you mentioned.
In anything you pick up, in anything you touch. Anything, including you, including me. And what that means, now give that a thought for a moment. We're made in the image and likeness of divinity. That's an inside reality. That's not something that's external. I got to go up here and get divine with this image and be just right so I'm like it. No, it's from within that I am in the image and likeness of divinity. And I want to tell you a little something. This is a bit of an aside, but I want to tell you something. In terms of health and healing, you need to present to your inner person sometimes, in order for things to work right, an image that is correct about what's not right in your body. Now, if that's way too vague for you, I'm going to get personal. A few months ago, I was fighting a bad prostate problem and having to be catheterized, and it was very unpleasant and so on. And so finally, after doing this, the doctors decided that they ought to look at surgery and go in and reduce and find out what my prostate was like. They told me the prostate in a man my age should be somewhere around 45 to 50 cubic centimeters. That'll make it the size of a walnut. And that's about what they'd like to see. So they took a sonogram of my prostate. It was 200. So obviously, it's huge and in the way and causing trouble, and it's shutting down the delivery system of the urine and so on and so forth. Well, what I needed at that point, and I knew I needed it, and I understood some of this even before I'd gotten all this study done, but if this was truly helping, I knew I needed to envision a healthy prostate. And I didn't have to go to a book and get a drawing of one and say, that's right. No. All I had to do was drop in and let let the word, the divinity of Yeshua in me be that vision of perfection. And then tell my body to line up. Well, that we joined to some things that included some neat alternative ideas that we were working with. But that's the really basic point I was doing. And what's happened last time we checked in a different manner than the first time, but it appears my prostate has gone down to being about 50 centimeters. Now,
With no intervention.
huh?
With no medical
No intervention. In the medical sense. And so I'm telling you that this kind of thinking, of finally realizing who and what you are, and the divinity is that intimate to you, to everything, changes the way you think and the way you act. If you really believe these mountains out here, these hillsides are within them lies all of that, lies divinity. Boy, it changes your attitude about ripping that all up for a crazy reason. And you get personally offended. You have a sense of offense or you get offended with people who do that. You know, it's innate. It's a clear thing that surfaced in fairly recent years. I saw a tape the other day, a DVD about the courage that it took and the rise in consciousness that it took, that came step by step for men to take on whale ships and say you can't justify eliminating this from our earth. And they put their lives on the line to tell that to people, and they got the job done. It's not all settled and finished, but we're taken care of. You know, when I was a young boy, there were only 450 buffalo bison in the United States. And what happened? Consciousness rising happens, and has happened. And when you start being able to be willing to look at the rise of consciousness, you're going to find it all over history, you're going to find it all over modern things, and you're going to weep when it doesn't happen. And you're going to weep when politicians are sinking down in consciousness instead of rising. You're going to weep when scientists are not paying attention and sinking down rather than rising in consciousness. And we know about that. We know, you know, a consciousness rising thing that was impelled on people all through the Cold War kept us to keep that brake on and not just say, okay, let's push a button and get these, eliminate these people. Because the conscious rising that came by dealing with Hiroshima and Nagasaki caused a lot of rising consciousness within the other human beings. The King Henrys of England didn't have any idea about that. They didn't. That consciousness wasn't in place.
Yeah, I see the concept that you're describing for Teilhard in terms of consciousness. Let me make two distinctions. If I grab King Henry and drag him up here and give him a chance to interact with us and learn from us, there are two possibilities. One is he would have sufficient capacity to look and understand, or he wouldn't. So there's consciousness in terms of improved knowledge and awareness, which King Henry doesn't have. Is there also consciousness in terms of ability to understand?
Capacity for understanding.
Capacity.
See, one is capacity, one is containment, which you've actually contained in, but your capacity goes up.
So capacity is evolving as well.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's critical to understanding the nature of evolution. So the capacity. Now, for instance, I talk about spirit being in matter. That's a very low amount of spirit or presence of spirit. It's there, but it's spread out broadly, and it's, you can't take the microphone to it and say, okay, talk table. It's not at that kind of level. We see it now, but this is where on the back page, what I'm trying to get to all day is on the back page some of the terms here that are important to know about how the mechanics of evolution work. When I finally look at this thing as being a necessity of a growth process, an evolutionary process, it's the only way it can happen, then I don't have a problem with the entire universe being created in potential, but not in expression. Now, that raises up some pretty interesting points of then trying to figure out what's going on. Because when you have this broad multiplicity out here, and you take it through the entire universe, that's huge. But it's out of that hugeness, there's something of the spirit that is very important, that's pushing, that's pulling, that's working on all of that very simple, and they wouldn't even be minerals, they wouldn't even be atoms yet, they would be particles of atoms. That's all they had to be to get the first stage done. You could just have tiny particles, but they have an innate push to be united. And that's the spirit, that's love. And although it's not very strong, it works. So as they start getting around and complexifying, becoming more concentrated, it complexifies the spirit and the consciousness. And it can rise then from particles to an atom. And when you start getting to atoms, then you can get to hydrogen. When you get to hydrogen, all of this material universe has got its roots in hydrogen. I don't know if you knew that, but it all does. Everything can come out of hydrogen. Once you understand the ability for that unifying thing to keep coming up with an increase of consciousness, which produces a kind of energy, which in terms of spirit, that's what spirit is energy. And it produces an effect of heat into these things. And as you get heat and energy and that pressing for unity, and if you give it enough time, and the universe has had that time, you get minerals that become part of all the elements that we know that are also in motion, just exactly like a cell. And so on the big level you have this motion going on, and this energy going on, and so you start spinning out galaxies and stars and the reality that's out there. And the science that's out there is just almost impossible for us to comprehend. But it's all resulting from the same process. It's one creation. Now, what differences would there be in the universe than what? And we got to go explore that to find them and find out what it is. And that's where I hesitated a little bit ago when I said, okay, what happens if you have? Well, we don't know what the answer to this question is. Does all of reflective life have to come out looking just exactly like us? Maybe not. There's reasons that Chardin saw, that Teilhard saw, that it definitely had to have characteristics of being bipedal, erect, free limbs, a large cranial structure, a nervous system. Those all things had to be there for us to be humans. But it doesn't matter that there's different branches bringing those things together. That doesn't change anything from our humanity. It doesn't deter. That doesn't make us better or worse than the other one. It's just that we all have a humanity. Would that process be exactly the same out there? Well, my likelihood is no, it wouldn't be. But it doesn't matter, because maybe we'll stop using humanity to describe us, and we'll start taking self-reflection to describe us. The breakthrough of self-reflection in any part of the universe then would be my brother and sister in self-reflection. Our looks might be different by vast amount, but that would be almost beside the point. The point is that if you start with this design of divinity to bring about self-reflection so that there can be beings that have the ability to enter into communion, love, and unity with divinity, you can work all that out of the universe. That can all work out within the universe. And one of the things that you get into then is you begin to realize that the Word, first of all, the Spirit clearly is seen in every particle of creation. But by inference and by deduction, the Word's part of that. But when I say that, the incarnation then is happening in everywhere in the universe. Not necessarily in the person of a person as we know Jesus. I'm not sure that's duplicated in the universe. But the Word is everywhere. And that Spirit and Word everywhere is in the process of bringing everything back to divinity and fullness everywhere. And we're part of that. There is a possibility, and I think you need to look at it carefully. Barbara got to hear a man named Brian Swin give a lecture years and years ago, and he is a very deeply invested Chardinian scientist. I mean, he really is locked in with Chardin, and that's why in the new book here they included a preface from Brian Swin. But he did a thing back then to show the uniqueness of the earth. And if you've never studied that, if you've never seen anybody do that, it's really, really interesting. The absolute uniqueness of life and humanity on this earth, and what it takes to get here, or what it took to get here. The formation of water and its nature, the nature of water, the formation of it. And then it turns out you got to have a sun that's in the right position and the right distance, and then you got to have a moon. You can't do without the moon, but it's got to be precise. It can't be 1 degree different than it is now, and have this life thing work here. And you just start going through all these things, and then you start calculating the statistical chance that that's going to happen in more than one place, and you get 1 in trillions or something like that. So it's possible. We're unique in all the universe. That's a possibility. And it certainly is for us to discover and find out. And if we discover and find that to be the case, it's going to have to take change and rise in our consciousness to handle that. And by the way, it's really happening. I don't want to get too far off track here, but I'm comfortable at the fact that there's alien life out there, and that alien life has gotten involved in this earth some. But I don't want to go there too far. I just want to say that, and just say it doesn't disturb me to look at that. It doesn't disturb me to think in terms of its relationship to evolution. That just doesn't disturb me. So the mechanisms are, once you have the creation started with its up and down, its increase and decrease. And remember, I talked about that also being a pulse. And what I never see Teilhard using the word pulse. And yet at the same time, I saw several pulses that I listed on the back page that actually he talks about. And so, like for instance, in the simple matter, and everything's got two types of energy in it. It's got a tangential energy, and this is the energy of the molecules that hold them together, the energy that give it definition, that then give you something to measure and weigh certain these things. That's all tangential energy. And we know the power of tangential energy because we split apart and we got this huge bang out of it. And tremendous heat and tremendous explosion. Or if we put them together in the wrong way, they force them together, they do the same thing. And so that's tangential energy. But also there's radial energy. And radial energy is the energy of the spirit. It's on the inside. But what Teilhard points out in one of his articles is how the tangential energy causes the rise in consciousness over here. And how the rise in consciousness over here causes the tangential energy to go up.
Say again what tangent.
Tangential energy is the outside energy. It's the outside energy of all of creation.
There's a typo there.
Huh? Bottom type.
It should be tan, not trans.
Yeah, I got tangential. It's tangential. I'm sorry. Correct that word there.
It's
Probably.
radial, not radical.
Yes, radial, not radical.
Now, it might be radical, but it's
Radial.
radial.
Yeah, I do my work and I know what I'm doing. It's just that you guys can't see it that way because I do it wrong. Anyway, shorthand did a little bit of that too. Anyway, so you know, yes, you got these two and this pulse sets up. There's a pulse that goes into place between radial and tangential energy. And pulse becomes extremely important in the understanding of things. Increase and decrease is another pulse. Things that increase and decrease. And if you don't believe that pulse is true, take a look at your life history. Because your life history has got both increase and decrease in it. And you pulse between them. And you know, one modifies the other. You don't want that increase to go wild to the point that you become schizophrenic or so psychotic that they put you in an institution, because that's what it'll do if you do. I watched a series that dealt with bipolar in that kind of way. And boy, when that person, that bipolar thing was at those highs, they were wild, you know, on anything control and out of line. And they put them in institutions. They have to, because it's the only thing that they're in a place they're safe. So the two, your increase and your decrease, are affecting your very development. And you don't develop if you don't have increase and decrease. Here's another one on the inside. Safety and risk. That's more of an inside type of energy process. Part of the inside of things. And you know, I figured it out a long time ago that any healthy human being has got risk in their life. And people who avoid risk never develop fully. Period. You need to walk into risk. You need to deal with it. And so I'm sitting back and I'm saying, well, let's see, if I use this principle that I'm made in the image and likeness of divinity, and I've just figured out that all humankind, if it's healthy, has risk in it, of some kind or another, or many kinds, then that means if I'm made in the image and likeness of divinity, divinity must be a risk taker. And I thought, so I said one day, I said, Yeshua, I got this thing on risk, figured out a little bit. He said, yeah, sounds good. I said, then that makes Father a risk taker, doesn't it? He said, oh yeah. I said, well, what risk did Father take? Who made you? I was out of comments. That was it. Okay. You know, but so simple. And so that pulsation between risk and safety, between movement and new, there's a pulsation that as the mechanics of evolution come to a point where it's going to get ready to move to the next level, there's a this going on at that point of contact. There's a point of going over and a point of coming back that's going on that sets the stage and is part of the break for stepping forward into a new evolutionary process or step or being. And that certainly is true at the primate level when humankind is about to come, there's a thing going like this in here. That's what he talks about. That's pulse. And pulse is critical to life. He never talked about that in that way, but I really see it that way. And so you begin to see that as a mechanism, that pulse is a mechanism of creation and of evolution.
But he does talk about dualities, and he brings them
Yes,
together
and
all
he
the
generally
time.
speaking, now no one destroys duality as well as Teilhard does. Everything that gets dual, he just takes and rips it apart. But he always says that it's going to work, that there's a process of creation of the two is going to work when they're together, when you stop the duality. And he always brings duality back to oneness. But in that oneness, there's a pulse. The dual parts have a pulse in that oneness. That's really fascinating to me. I think he would step back and say, "Ooh, that's nice. I agree with you. That's nice." I think he'd say something like that to that recognition of pulse, because we've found out about pulse in the human body and health to be so critically important. It is more than I know the study of, but I know enough to know how important it is. You know, the problem of dependence and independence being pulsed properly. You can't raise children to be just totally independent. And heavens knows, a bunch of families and teachers did that a few years ago and tried to do that. Created a mess. Because they didn't have any balance in that independence. There's freedom and there's rules. There's need for both. And there's inside and outside that affects that freedom of rules and that independence. And that pulse is really important. So you have to have that in the situation of things. Now, in the process of this, there are things that cause that to happen. But always, if you start seeing pulse, you'll start understanding some of the mechanics of creation. Because once things get to moving and you got this thing that unites, there's a uniting, separating thing going on. But that uniting, separating thing, as it affects, it selects. And it gets into greater definition and more definition of everything. See, when you start with matter and you get it, kind of see your way to elements, then when you get to elements, you've got to make for a thing called megamolecules. Because in megamolecules, there's a whole lot of development that is going on and specialization of definition, specified and developed, complexified in that soup. And that's really important, because that process of doing that process of pulse, creating that super soup there, then gets ready for some things that will then happen to where life can occur. And so you got to have that stage of supermolecules in there. Most evolutionists and most people looking in Darwin's system never brought in the supermolecules hardly at all. And of course now we're getting better at it. We see it more, and we also know that you're going to get to life. You're going to have to talk about a virus next, probably, because it's really complex. And you're talking about major protein developments and things like that, and things I don't even know how to talk about yet. But they're complex. And it turns out that a virus, in terms of our life right now, one of the things that makes a virus potent is that a virus can make a combination with a bacteria. And anybody know what that is? In modern scientific terms, that's mycoplasma. And a mycoplasma thing is the combination of a virus and a biological cell. And it's not micro, it's micro. But anyway, when that hits the human being and gets involved, the doctors don't know what to do about it. They really don't know how to handle that. And that will define autoimmune diseases. It'll define a lot of other things that develop. Will be in this business of these mycoplasmas. Well, I'm wandering around in all this field, and I'm going through things, and I had no idea of TR at this time. And lo and behold, in a way that was really kind of strange, I found out about the inside of mycoplasma. And I know how to take care of it in the body. And it'll cause huge breakthroughs in physical life by being able to deal with that. But it's done through a inside operation to expose, develop, and handle and set aside. But you had to do that, you had to understand what a mycoplasma was. And a mycoplasma and how it could form. Boy, I tell you, this gets a little complicated. This gets out beyond what Teilhard was talking about. But we need to see that's a consciousness in rising. My consciousness for that was not possible. I didn't have that knowledge, and I didn't have the capacity to handle it either. But I did grow up where I come to that point and I could see it. And then one day it went snap, and we did it, and wow! This lady dropped one of the autoimmune system problems of not lupus and not, oh goodness gracious, it's a common one. Anyway, within 2 weeks, she had been a year suffering from it, couldn't get any freedom from it, and within 2 weeks she was gone. And so that process by which we got things pulsing, and sometimes they pulse out in bad directions, and that's really true. So we have to understand that. We have to be able to know how to work at that level to handle it, and we need to see how that gets redeemed, and then go on. But in the process of concentration, you get complexification. Things get more complex as it gets concentrated. You have a rise in consciousness. You have an increase and a lot of times you'll have some decrease in the tangential energy while that radial energy is really increasing. And they need that for the evolutionary stage to take place. So those processes become able to be seen in all kinds of different ways as life develops. And that's where one of the things, again, where Teilhard is very good, because he was an earth scientist, and then he became very involved in life science too, also, that you begin to, it says, oh, it makes sense. And what begins to make sense is it always works out with the same principles. Now, a couple of those words to know. Complexity I've talked a little bit about. The fact that energy is psychic energy, tangential and radial energy, arrangement and unification. That's interesting too, is that there's a difference between arrangement and unification, but there's got to be, a pulsing in there to get that going. And then
Caleb, where are you going with this?
I'm trying to get you to see how evolution brings about its steps. That's all. And I'm trying to say that for a reason, because once you understand the steps that have started over here with particles that came to be elements, that came to be supermolecules, that came to be where life broke out, and then when that life breaks out and goes up the evolutionary chart all the way up from bacteria up to primates, when you begin to get a good fix on that and you begin to rest in it, then we're going to take those same principles and go from here forward. We'll use the same principles to describe what the future of evolution is, the future of humankind is, by just simply saying, yeah, the same things that work to get this point are going to keep working out in the future. Which brings me to a thing I wanted to spend just a little bit of time with, because we're kind of touching into it there. And it has to do with this line that I saw one day. And the line was, here's creation, the beginning, and over here is omega and ending, and we're someplace in the middle here. We don't know what part of the middle we're in. We might be up here, down there. I mean, we really don't know for sure. But we began to realize that whatever we could see here has to be in there and there too. So, for instance, this is the way I came about understanding the Spirit being necessary. Was that I saw, ooh, I got Spirit in me. And I'm related to all of creation. And when I saw that, then that meant there had to be Spirit back here. So Spirit became one of these things that's on this line here. There's Spirit was seen in humans, then your Spirit is going to be here in all these places. Now he's going to see the problem of evil being in and around us, and you begin to analyze that, but you're going to see it's back here too, and you're going to see it's going to be part of that finish too. So everything you can see in us, and where we're at, and what we can do by self-reflection to get to, then we're going to find is going to be in all places. So I've listed them here. Consciousness is in both ends. Original sin. And then redemption. And then incarnation, divinity, evil, diminishment, suffering, union, death. All those things are part of all the parts. You can't turn your back on one and say it isn't part of it. No, it's part of it. It's all part of it. And see, when we get to know the mechanisms, then we can say the mechanisms are going to be true up here just as much as they are over here. And that's very important, because that's going to give us a very clear picture of where evolution is going to go. There's a lot of...
How so?
Huh?
How so?
Well, the one is...
How do you get any direction out of that?
Okay, just take the fact of consciousness here, okay? Then we see consciousness in here. And when we see it in here, we see it develop and rise, and its effect that it has. Well, it's going to rise and reach its perfect apex. So then we have to come back to what is the perfection of consciousness and what does it mean. And there we're dealing with the definition of divinity itself. We're now looking at that point where that communion union is complete so much, and it is the consciousness is complete. And so now we know a lot about this by being able to realize consciousness is going to find completion here. It had a beginning here that was minute, but it's going to rise to completion. And that's true of spirit. Our experience of spirit is somewhat limited, greatly limited. And it's one of the interesting things about the Aborigines is they have some inside things in their life development that we don't know what to do with. One of them is they do a lot of communication with no words, otherwise known as, you got a word for it?
Telepathy.
Telepathy. And they do this telepathy. I mean, these guys do this and have done this for as long as we've known the Aborigines. And 200 miles is nothing for them to do their telepathy with each other.
Who does this? I missed that.
Huh?
Who does this?
The Aborigines in Africa.
Australia.
Australia, I'm sorry. Australia. I saw Australia in my mind and I called it Africa. Yes, Australia.
So who has the higher level of consciousness?
Well, it's certainly at that point level of consciousness is certainly developed. Yes, at one point, yes. And so when you start looking around that there's these individual points that are high. You know, for instance, level of consciousness that a good shaman has. And we thought that was a negative thing, and that was just borderline out of the demonic. And if you didn't know what was going on, that's generally what you did. You tossed, and said, no, that's out of the dark side. No, it's not. A good shaman, and there's some bad ones that do, it's like what's the thing of sticking needles into, that's,
Acupuncture.
no, not acupuncture, in the negative side of
Oh, voodoo dolls.
voodoo thing. And it's both, see, there you got two sides. You got acupuncture being useful, but you also can make bad out of it. So you always have to be sensitive to that. And but if you take a person who's a shaman in a good sense, they understand the relationship so deeply between little living plants and people that they know what it makes and what it takes to be healthy. The pygmies are really good at it. And they have all kinds of interesting things they do to a pregnant woman. And at different times rub these different things on her abdomen. These are great. They really work. They do some really good stuff. And now, finally, the scientists are going out and saying, what are they doing? It's so good. Let's go figure it out, and then we'll make some pills that'll do the same. Now, they butcher it pretty bad because they make the pill about 5,000 times stronger than it needs to be, and they don't know what. They only pick up part of what they want to learn with that. They don't pick up the whole inside story. But it's out there. And there's so much of these points of consciousness. And so you can have, I worked with a man, and he taught me how to do a scan on a human being to know what their body is saying. And then he, of course, does this as a living, and he's really good at it. And you stand in front of him, and he'll go, he's testing your muscle testing while you're doing it. In 10 minutes, he'll give you back a report on your health. He'll blow your socks off, and take $5,000 to $10,000 in 2 weeks in the hospital. He even get close to what he told you. And he gets really good. And I kidded him one day. He didn't have to. He's so quick. I said, you just didn't have all that in the muscle response to that person. No, he says, I'm sensitive before I get there. I know. But see, he's really got his consciousness functioning at that level. And he can train people to do that. That's trainable, that's teachable. And so all kinds of things that we begin to see then is part of who and what we are goes back to this. Some form, for instance, as an example, some form of community lies both here and here. And this, of course, will lead to perfection of it, but some form of it had to be present in the initial creation for it to be at a level where it is with us. And community is very important to us, and community and socialization is very much a part of us. Well, we've covered lots of ground in maybe not as precise a way as I'd like, but we've gotten through a lot of mechanics. If you look at now, in the terms on the top there, arrangement, unification, consciousness, a directed activity, specialization, differentiation, instinct, folding in on itself. Now, this is one of the things that he talks about, and it's a little hard to understand the mechanics, but what he says is when things get close to rising to the next stage, it is one of the things it does, it folds in on itself. And that then increases the depth of understanding, the depth of the consciousness, the depth of the trace for the breakthrough. And so that concept and definition needs a little attention too. And of course, one of the things that is really important because in spirit, you've got to have the key things to spirit have got to be in both places. So one of the keys here that I like to look at is relationship. And relationship can be external or internal, inside, outside, it can be both. But it's very deeply a part of spirit. So it's got to be found here some way, in some shadow way or some minimal way, and you'll find its perfection here. So generally speaking, in the creation part, all these things are going to be somewhat in the subtle, diffuse kind of thing, but they're there, and they're coming to a fullness over here. And so we'll talk about that. One of the things that I'll have to spend some time on for its own space is the new sphere. the noosphere is going to need some attention, and I don't want to get off into it today. The noosphere, it basically is in Teilhard's view, is an energy that surrounds the earth, that holds all the thinking that humans have been doing, and particularly as it grows in consciousness. And I'll get into that. I want to get into that in more detail, so don't worry about that being something I need right now. That the cerebralization, that's an important term. The development of the brain, cerebral, physical brain, is critical to the evolution of reflective thought. And that then has to include the nervous system. Now, something that Chardin probably didn't know, because it had only been coming up recently, is that they have found that in the heart you have synapses activity that's of the nature of what is in the brain. You have a brain in your heart, is what it's saying. And it turns out, which is really pretty interesting, that one of the things they're saying about that brain in the heart, it does more to direct what the body should be doing than the brain does. It comes out of the heart. That then deals with a whole bunch of poets that talk about the heart and the center of the heart and being really important. And development and complexifying, that's all very important. And so these are all kind of the terms that he's using to define the mechanisms. And what I'd like to do right now is pause and take a breath.